I need some traction. You need some traction.
Hey everybody, my name is Lloyd Lobo. I'm the co-founder of Boast AI and Traction Conf, and I'm super excited to have Erik here today with us. Erik's a visionary serial entrepreneur and someone who went hiking and broke his leg. That's why he's working out of his bed today. And he had to hike 3 miles with his broken leg to get to a bus to take him to the hospital, ER.
No, I didn't go to the hospital for 2 days. I thought it was a sprained ankle. I hiked it took me 3 hours to hike 3 miles down a river. That was super fun last week.
Awesome. And Erik's disrupting the marketing space, and he's going to tell you all about it. Erik's bootstrapped the company to 75 million in revenue, 0 outside funding, built a team of 135 people. Erik, take it away, man. I'm looking forward to learning from you.
Sure. So give you guys a little background on the company and how we started. And obviously bootstrapping a service business is a little different. So I'll talk a lot about funding. I also have a venture fund, and we've invested in, out of the fund, about 9 different companies. And we've also overall invested in about 30. So basically the company got its start because my background's in e-commerce. So built and sold 2 e-commerce companies. And about 7 years ago, after selling my second one, started advising and consulting for a lot of brands. I'd built a reputation of knowing how to scale these businesses. And I was advising for Red Bull, Verizon, HP, as well as a lot of startups, and kept running into the same challenge over and over again, which is when it came time to execute on marketing, it's really difficult for these companies because you kind of have 2 options: either hire a team in-house or hire an agency. And what I found was hiring in-house generally is not cost effective. Like, good marketers are expensive. You can get cheap marketers, but there's a huge opportunity cost in marketing for having bad marketers. And attracting the best marketers out there is also really, really hard. And so affording them and attracting them is hard. And even if somehow you're able to build an incredible internal marketing team and afford it, you're now operating in a vacuum. And my favorite example of this is in chat. Anybody remember the Pepsi ad with Kendall Jenner where she basically solves racism with giving a can of Pepsi away? Anyone remember that? Yeah, exactly. So that was really fun for me because it was right after the CMO of Pepsi had gone on stage and said, agencies suck, they're worthless, we can do marketing without an agency. And then they launched that brilliant ad themselves. So you need that outside perspective. You need those relationships. Agencies exist for a reason, and most successful companies use them for a reason. But the problem with agencies, and I'm sure you've all seen this, 99% of them are full of shit. They're built by people that have never built a successful company, that don't know how to actually do marketing. They may know how to pull levers on Facebook, but they think that that's like the end all be all of marketing a business, and it's far from it. So you see these people with the thought leadership they put out and contributing articles and all this, and frankly, bullshit case studies where they're like, oh yeah, I spent $1 last night and made someone $300,000. And it's like, if you were able to do that, you should be a billionaire. Like, this is obviously bullshit, but there's tons of those out there, and it's a bad ecosystem. And the few agencies that are good tend to get really expensive, want long contracts, high minimums, something that makes them hard to work with. And so the end result is, if you're not a really sexy startup or some Fortune 1000, you're probably not getting easy access to great marketing. And so that's what I ran into over and over again, got sick of it, decided to hire my own team, started with a small SWAT team to help my existing advisory roles. So I hired 7 people, each with their own expertise, a fractional CMO, a Facebook marketer, an email marketer, a web designer, et cetera. And went back to these brands and said, everything's a la carte, month to month, cheaper than hiring in-house. The idea is we can spin up a team that fits your needs based on this menu. And so that's how we started. I'm going to give you the timeline here because, again, this is about how to bootstrap to this point. But at this point, we're 170 full-time people, offices in LA, New York, and Boston, currently working on opening up Atlanta, Miami, and Chicago. We've actually made hires in all of them. So now we're actively working on opening up those territories. We have a venture fund, as I mentioned, as well. We invest in a lot of marketing technology as well as some consumer brands. We were one of the first investors in FabFitFun, which is now a unicorn, et cetera. So that's kind of our business in a nutshell. We actively manage about 500 companies marketing. So how we started. So again, and I'm going to give a lot of detail here to give you guys an idea, hopefully from kind of A to Z over the next hour. So I was consulting for 6 months from the middle of 2013 to the end. I got to the end. All right, I'll change the background because I get that feedback a lot. You guys can see my bed. How about that? Because again, just if you didn't hear, I broke my leg, so I'm literally working from bed right now. So,
Let's see a broken leg.
You want to see the broken leg? You can see my broken leg. It's not that bad. And then I have my dog down there. The break actually doesn't hurt. It's more just the boot that I'm wearing, which is why it's open. It actually ended up screwing up my foot. So my foot is like one big bruise and rubbed raw. So that's why I talked to the doctor and he's like, just stay with it in the boot on your bed, but you don't need to strap it up. So yeah, good times. So back to the story. So I was consulting and I was at the time 26 years old. Again, I had built 2 successful e-com companies, so had knowledge that most people didn't. And I'll get into the leg break at the end of this. I just want to make sure we have time. And so I was consulting and found this problem. And the other insight that I don't share that publicly normally is when I sold my last company, I planned a trip at the end of the year to go to Thailand for 3 weeks. And I started consulting because I didn't just want to burn through my savings, and I was working on a tea company. And when I got closer to it, I realized in consulting, you don't get vacation days with your clients. If I take off for 3 weeks, I'm just not getting paid. And there's also a pretty strong chance that when I get back, they're not rehiring me because now I've shown them they don't need me. So I had to scramble to figure it out. And so I hired a few people to start helping with their businesses. And I was making about 30 grand a month as a consultant. And I was used to making, because I was built all these companies, paying myself like 3 grand a month. And my expenses hadn't really increased. So that's when I was like, okay, so I have like 27 grand a month in budget to go start investing in building something. So I basically convinced 7 people to work for me for 3 grand a month each with upside, and said, you're going to make 3 grand a month. And then every client my email marketer, you get 3 grand a month base. And then every client you work on, you get 30% of what they pay us. And so I did that with 7 people. Seems like a great idea at the time. That worked for that didn't even really work for very long. Turns out most people that would take a job in our employees don't like that model. If you're not an entrepreneur, you don't want to eat what you kill. Maybe a salesperson, but day-to-day employees are like, screw this. So literally what happened is those first 7 people, only one of them was left after 6 months. They all burnt out. They didn't like the volatility. They wanted to just get a job. The benefit though was the moment I hired them, I was able to start selling. Like I've always been able to sell. And one of the key hires I made became my co-founder and business partner, because he really was there from day one, even kind of pre-day one. We actually had built other companies together before this. And I called him and said, I think there's something here. I need someone that can kind of handle my clients and like be the like CMO. He was like the outsourced CMO portion of this. He had run e-commerce companies too. And within 2 weeks, he's like, you just go build this thing and like grow it and network. I'll handle delivering and I'll handle managing the team. I was like, great. So like we started with him as like our outsourced CMO. Then he became our director of operations, and then quickly became my business partner and COO. And I can go more into that too, but I ended up over time giving him more and more of a piece of the company because it was just earned. He stepped into the role. So for anyone on here that's not the founder, I'm going to talk to that too, because whether it's a founder trying to figure out how to allocate equity or someone else trying to figure out how to get equity, I'll talk to that. CMO stands for Chief Marketing Officer. And we went with that moniker because when we talk to people, we don't want to be a digital agency. We don't want to be a Facebook marketing company. And please keep the questions coming. I'm happy to make this conversational in some ways. But yeah, we didn't want to be just bucketed in with every other agency. We wanted to be like, no, we're premium, we're strategic, we're not just an agency. And that's where your outsourced CMO, which actually we got the trademark officially. So your outsourced CMO is our trademark. And so he came in, he did that, which allowed me, he was managing the team full time, which allowed me to focus on sales and marketing and building our brand. And within the first month, we went from me making 30 grand in consulting fees to making 60 grand. So literally on average, our clients doubled their spend with us to hire us for one of these other services. And then it just started to grow from there. And so what's nice about that is because, again, I didn't really have that much money in the bank. I had a little bit just in case a client fired us, I could withstand it, but I had enough that I could, I was able to work out deals. I was forced, frankly, to work out deals. It was like, someone could come to me and be like, I want to make 100 grand. I'm like, great, I don't have it. So I'm going to pay you 36 with upside. And if you're not into that, move on. So I had to build my business in a way that was sustainable and would actually work on a cash flow level because I had no money. That was it. And so going back to the hiring part, Tony is my partner's name. He stuck it out, but the other and he did it on that. Actually, I'll go through that timeline too, because I think this is important when you're building these businesses. So Tony joined for that $3,000 a month pay, plus he got 30% of the strategy piece of what people were paying us. And that's how we started. He came back to me within I think it was a month and said, hey, like now I'm managing the whole team. I'm not just managing this piece. So I'd rather have a bigger piece, or sorry, a smaller piece of the whole pie. And I said, great, I agree, but I'm not going to give you a rev share because you're also managing their pay and stuff like that with me. So why don't you get 10% of profit and we'll do it quarterly. So that's how we did it for 2 quarters. And after the second quarter, he said, hey, I don't think we should be just distributing money out of this. I think there's something to build long-term here. This was him being mature, frankly. And he said, why don't you just give me equity at this point? We're 6 months in. We've built something that's starting to catch on here. And you're giving me 10% of profit anyways. Like, let me have 10% of ownership and let's keep the money in the business. And we established having equal salaries at that point, all this stuff. I went, great. So he ended up with 10%. A full year later, so a year and a half into business, long story short, we ended up in another conversation where he felt it was inequitable. We had built something solid, and I'll get into that part of it too. And he said, I think I've done a lot more than 10% of what we've created. And I said, I agree. And we went through a practice. There's a really good article that makes this simple. And it's an article about like how it's like the 100 things you need to know about starting a business. And it has some really funny ones, like don't fucking give an NDA. Like no one's stealing your stupid idea. Like all these amateur mistakes people make, but it broke down how to give away equity in the beginning very simply. You give 20% to who creates the product, 20% to who finances it, 20% to the founders, 20% to the sales and marketing effort, and 20% to the operator. That's how it's broken out. So 20, 20, 20, 20. I really like that. When there is no value, you have no idea yet. Like it just simplifies it. And for us, we had no product. Our people are a product. So we looked at it 4 categories. We had operation, founder, sales and marketing, and financing. And so when we revisited our equity pool, I was like, I'm doing all the selling, I'm marketing. I founded the company. I financed it. I paid you, even though it was a low salary, I still paid you. And so you were handling the operation. And I think you've pretty much handled it because he did allow me to go grow this while he handled the operations. I was like, I think 75-25 is fair. He agreed. So 20 founder, 20 operator, 20 marketer, 20 product, and 20 finance. And I forgot who wrote the article. I'm sorry, but that was not my original thought, or I didn't come up with this. It came from somewhere, but he agreed that was a fair way to do it. And we did 75-25, and that was 5 years ago. It hasn't come up since. So we found other ways to compensate based on individual things, but we've always treated each other really well. And so a lot of co-founders, a lot of partners deal with a lot of conflict. We've never really had that much of a problem. Like, don't get me wrong, we have our shit like anyone else, but we've never had anything any crazy blowout. There's been debates, there's been arguments, there's been stern conversations, but there's never been a true critical problem on either side. So that is how we created our partnership. And again, we agreed to equal pay, which in terms of the equity split actually gives him a little bit of a benefit, but I was always comfortable with that. You know, as long as you're not being greedy in these kind of situations, and, you know, I still have the best benefit. I own 75% of Hawke Media. It's a big company now. It's a great place to be. But, you know, as we raise our salaries sometimes, or we do certain things, you know, to help benefit ourselves, he does get some of those benefits, and that's okay. It's not quite 75-25 on all splits, if that makes sense. So being okay with not being greedy and giving up a little bit more than you normally would is sometimes okay, in my opinion, especially when you're being long-term focused. I assume that I'm going to be running this for the next 30 years. So I don't really give a shit about that extra few $1,000s I might give him this year, that kind of thing. So, yeah, so that was really important in how we started growing, because that allowed us to bifurcate this responsibility where he puts it, and I think it's actually a fair statement in the beginning. I went out and made promises. He delivered on them and made sure we delivered on them. So I was able to spend all of my time networking, building my brand, being out and about, getting into every organization and club and room that I could, and talking about Hawke Media and making it in the beginning seem much bigger than it was, because I didn't have to do anything on the execution side, because the moment a client signed with us, they met Tony and our team and let me know if you need anything. And it was that simple. So, and so we started to grow, and and so basically the first year we went from 7 people in the beginning to, we ended the year around 17 people. And we also, keep in mind, and I didn't really share this a little bit, but like, I didn't plan on starting some big agency. It wasn't like I built a big business plan and I'm like, this is what we're going to create. We just got in the room and I was like, this year we're going to do $1 million. We'll figure this out. And then once that started to roll out, it was the end of the first year. So yeah, so we did 1.01 million the first year and our goal was $1 million. So we hit it with, 1% over our goal, which is crazy. And all bootstrapped again. We had I didn't even have money in the bank. Like, this wasn't like it wasn't like I was self-financing. We just ran it off its own cash flow. And we did everything month to month. So that's, again, a really important part of our business. Like, we have no long-term contracts. People come and go as they please. And we just built this. I was able to be a sales engine, and we built a good, cadence. And I was so used to consumer companies versus B2B that I don't get, like, when I sold yoga clothes, nobody gave me a contract to buy pants every month. I was selling direct to consumer. Like, there was no contracts. I didn't have predictable revenue other than just a law of averages. So that's how I'm used to running a business. So when I built my agency, we built it that way, where, like, over time we really monitored our average lifetime value of a customer. We monitored how hard it was to get a customer, and we were able to project that way and know that we're going to churn on average the XYZ% per month, per quarter, whatever. And that's how we started to build predictability. And at this point, we built a whole custom ERP system and software that we can really monitor I know what, based on a lot of metrics, I have a good idea of what kind of revenue and profit and everything we're going to do in August, even though we're on month-to-month contracts. So speaking of the yoga pants business, thoughts on bootstrapping physical. So yeah, and I'm going to get more into that, but the yoga pants business, we actually raised $2 million in pre-seed funding for pre-launch. So that's the other side of it. Raising money for growth and working capital is where it sometimes makes sense to raise money. But I will say, like, a good buddy of mine, Jake Casson, Movement Watches, if you guys are familiar, he bootstrapped that company he sold it for $200 million and never took outside funding. Did a Kickstarter, which helped get it kicked off the ground. But, like, you can bootstrap product businesses, but I'm not going to say, I run a venture fund. I'm not going to say that companies raising money is a stupid thing to do. I will say, if you can avoid it, I would. Because, and I'll get into that idea. I'll get into the whole bootstrapping philosophy. I just want to give you guys a little more of the story of scaling here. So yeah, got to 17 people. And really, that's when you start to get a little bit of margin compression after the first year, because you start to have to hire management layers. You start to have to figure out. And so you have to start tweaking your model. We also got an offer to sell the company. First year did $1 million in revenue. We got an offer to sell it to a big talent agency for $14 million. I was 28 years old, looking at a $14 million check for a company I just started that we profited 400 grand in the first year. Like, we did really well. As a 28-year-old, I was making great money. And again, first year, I still owned 90% of the company. So I made personally $360,000 my first year of running a business by being the socialite and the salesperson and building it and, taking the risk on financing it. So felt pretty good. My partner and I talked about it, and we went, you know what? We're going to stick with this. We're not going to take the sale. I think we've got a lot of opportunity to scale this thing. We couldn't come to a lot of the terms of the deal weren't right. And we kept going, but we made a commitment there. And these are all lessons I've learned that maybe some of you will take from, but we decided we're going to pretend that we're going to run this for the next 30 years. So we don't want to play game. We don't want to, like, be on a sprint here where let's build it as quick as we can and get out of it and hope that we can exit. or it's going to fail, because they've seen so many companies do that, and most of them fail. Most of them do not end up with massive exits. And my favorite story of that, again, you guys don't know this, but I worked at Science, the incubator, right after they launched Dollar Shave Club, so consulted for them and a lot of their portfolio. Dollar Shave Club was near insolvency when they sold to Unilever. So if that deal hadn't have gone through, that company was screwed. And you've seen it with Honest Company now, where they're on the decline because they couldn't get the deal they wanted. So like, I don't really like playing, Russian roulette with my business and just hoping that the luck hits and that I get a big exit. I'd rather just build a sustainable business. And so part of that becomes being self-sustaining, like sustaining yourself. So we talked about, after that, passing on that deal, what does this business need to look like and this was, again, 5.5 years ago. What do we need to look like to make this someplace that we want to work? My business partner loved golf. He had not had his kids yet, but was about to. But at the time, his priority was he wanted to play golf every other Wednesday morning. He'd a half day and go play golf. Like, totally sustainable, sounds great. So every other Wednesday, he'd be out of the office in the morning and playing golf. Mine was, I want to go on an epic trip somewhere in the world 2 to 3 times a year. I want to travel somewhere really cool. Totally doable on the income we were making, et cetera. Done. So that's what we did. And like, what that did was, I knew for me, every 4 to 6 months, knowing that I had some crazy vacation or trip coming up that I was going to go explore a new place. If you can't tell from the broken leg, I'm a little adventurous. That was enough to keep me really motivated. And for him, having that little break every other week, it made us feel like we were doing something that was, again, it wasn't a sprint, it was a marathon. And so we stuck with that. We started building out our management, and that's when you start to add layers. And by the end of year 2, we had 35 people. And we started hiring a couple salespeople and, starting to build that out. And I do want to save a lot of time for questions, so I will speed through this a little more. So again, we're 6.5 years old. Give you our numbers. We grew 2.5 times in the first year, and then doubled pretty much every year after that. And through that, basically, for every time you double, your culture changes. You need a new management layer. You need a lot of things as that comes. And so you have to get used to that. One of my favorite things, frankly, my partner said about culture is, it really like, people talk about like losing their culture. Like, our culture is not the same as it was when we were 7 people around a conference table, which was how we started. It's like, yeah, no shit. But it's kind of like, remembering your college days. Like, college is super fun. We partied, we had no responsibility. Like, I got to be honest, I barely went to class. Like, I went to University of Arizona, and it was like the most cliche fraternity, like, party fun experience in college that you could have. And it was a lot of fun. It doesn't mean that now isn't also good. It is different. I, married, running a business, have a lot of responsibility now. Very different than my college days. Both are fun, but they're different. Same thing with company culture. As you grow as a business, similar as you grow as a person, it doesn't mean that your old culture was bad. It doesn't mean that your new culture is bad, but it definitely changes. And it usually changes around every time you double. So every year we've doubled, and every year our culture has definitely had to change. And as you get bigger, a lot of processes have to come in place because you're affecting more people with decisions. Another great piece of advice from my partner, because I'm one to make quick decisions and be like, yeah, sure, that sounds good, whatever. And I kept approving a bunch of stuff in our company. And again, 160 people, give or take. He said, Erik, whenever you approve someone to do something, just remember you're doing it 160 times. Like, you tell someone, yeah, sure, pay for lunch, whatever. You just did that 160 times. Like, really remember. And so getting used to that as a founder becomes part of it. But back to the bootstrapping thing. So here's something that Lloyd and I talked about at the beginning, or before the getting on here, that's really important to understand with bootstrapping. So if you're growing fast, bootstrapping is very difficult from a working capital standpoint, meaning the cash in the bank. Like, yes, you can be hyper profitable, but what the example I'd give is, so in year 1, my company did $1 million in revenue, or $1 million in net revenue. I think gross revenue was probably 3, 4. So year 1 was just, you work with net revenue numbers. $1 million in revenue, 400 grand in profit. Year 2, $2.5 million in revenue. The issue with that is, let's say, at $2.5 million in revenue, my payroll was probably 1.5 million bucks. So let's give 125 grand a month. So I go into year 2 with $400,000 in profit, and then you pay the taxes on it. Now it's 250 grand. in cash in the bank. Cool. Because you got to pay away 40% of 37%. Thank you. Or actually, no, it's more than that. California's, now it's that. But pre-Trump, it was, and don't get me wrong, I'm not going to get into politics, but pre-Trump, it was worse than that. So it was probably around, 250 grand was probably in the bank at the end of year one. So you have 250 grand in the bank, but my payroll alone is 125 grand a month, let alone other expenses. Let's say I'm spending 150 grand a month in expenses at that point. So I have a month and a half of runway in the bank in a growing business that who knows how my revenue is going to shift, et cetera. It's a really hard cushion. It's terrifying. That's a fair statement. But you got to get used to it because, by the way, that shit doesn't change if you're growing fast and you're bootstrapping. It just scales. The nice thing about scale that I will say is statistics play out. So there's less, if you build your business right, you're not going to all of a sudden lose, like even in COVID, we didn't lose half our revenue overnight. So it becomes a little more stable that you're not going to just lose a bunch of, all your revenue overnight, which is why you see like a lot of companies that got completely shut down for months went bankrupt. Of course, who the hell has months and months and months of runway in the bank? It's unusual unless you're private equity or VC backed. It's just not a common thing to have. So in bootstrapping, just understand that is one of the things, one of the trade-offs. There is stress involved at that you have to come to terms with and be very diligent about managing your cash flow in your business because it's your lifeblood. So that's a trade-off. The benefit is we get to do whatever the hell we want with our business. And I talk about this to my own employees. I talk about it like even illegal. It's my own sacrifice to make. And I'm not saying we do anything illegal. I'm just saying like I can literally do whatever the fuck I want with my business. I have no one else to report to. I have the responsibility of my employees, my business partner, et cetera. But like decision-making wise, it's me. I get to do it. And so that if you're the right founder and you're ambitious and you want to do things, it really opens up a lot because there are many things I've done with my business that my best advisors, the smartest and most successful people in my life have told me not to do. And I've been like, yeah, but I have a little more context here, so I'm going to do it anyways. And I was right. And so if they were my board members, if they were our investors, they'd be freaking the fuck out. The example I give is month-to-month contracts. For years and years, I've been hearing that you're fine now because we're in a good economy. But the moment that the market freezes or there's a panic sell or something, you're going to lose so much business. It's going to be terrible. And we had our biggest month ever in June. The entire world shut down. We have month-to-month contracts. Every one of our clients could have fired us because they were panicking. But thank you. But the reason that happened was, and again, I'm going all over the place here, but the reason that happened is because we're month to month, a lot of people didn't feel the need to get ahead of it and fire us quickly to get out of their contracts because they knew they could fire us whenever things got bad. And then for a lot of e-commerce businesses, which is about 70% of our revenue and another 15% is B2B SaaS, they all did really well in this. So other than the handful of companies that panicked and shut everything down, the few that stuck with it, our average client doubled in revenue in Q2. You see it with Shopify. Shopify's revenue grew 96% in Q2. Those are all small and medium and some large e-commerce businesses that grew on average doubled in Q2. It's insane. So, and what that flexibility also allowed people to sign up with us during a crisis because they felt really comfortable knowing that they could get out at any time. So if things got worse, if the world fell apart, there was panic in the media, but the reality was consumer spending hadn't gone anywhere. So if you're a consumer company and in marketing, so some more stats for you guys, Facebook and Google ad costs dropped 30% in April. Market share for digital spend in consumer, so e-commerce, et cetera, went from 13% market share from brick and mortar to digital to 30 in Q2. The opportunity was massive. And thankfully, again, and by the way, we did really well. Almost all of our competitors are having layoffs. Because they have annual contracts, people don't know what's happening the next few months. They had to get out of them. They can always reassess, but they had to get the hell out now because they didn't know what they were going to expect. For us, it's like, just fire us when things get bad, if they do. And that made it really simple. So again, back to the, having investors, having outside capital, I wouldn't have been able to make those decisions. I also frankly, for the past 2 years, ran with very low profit because I wanted to reinvest in the company. Lloyd and I talked about this earlier. Like, I haven't taken money out of Hawke other than my salary, and I'll share it publicly. I pay myself 120 grand a year. It's a good salary. It's a reasonable salary. Living in LA, it's okay. But I've left most of the money in the business the past few years because it's a better place to put my money. I don't need to live in luxury. I don't need to be ridiculous. And we keep it in. And frankly, our profit has been 2018 and 19 profit was small because we wanted to build a big headquarters that we're now getting rid of. Be okay with sunk costs, by the way, guys. Really important lesson. I spent about $1 million investing in a new headquarters last year, on top of about $125,000 a month. And we moved in March of last year, and I'm getting rid of it now because it turns out going remote, which I was always fearful of as an owner, it turns out that it worked out really well. Our people are working really well. It's a little hard to manage the cultural aspect and that like nuanced people meeting at the coffee machine or having lunch together, and we're working through processes to build that out. But like any problem, I think there is a solution. And 84% of my team wants to stay remote, and now I can save 125 grand a year. Does it hurt that I invested $1 million a year ago to build that place that I planned on being in for the next 15 years? 100%. Does it feel really good to look at saving that kind of money on an annual basis? Also 100%. So, and by the way, this is where bootstrapping comes in. That's my money. Like, that is, I can make decisions with that money to like help it benefit my people, which we're going to do, and do the right thing with it, because I talk to my people all the time about this. Like, I need them to build this business too. I don't want to screw them, but some part of that money will end up in a bank account that I own. Doesn't mean I'm going to go buy, I'm not a bit flashy guy. So it doesn't mean I'm going to go like buy a fucking Lamborghini. I think it's the most ridiculous. Rent them, get your, go have fun, drive them. I know way too many friends with sports cars that never fucking use them. Like, don't waste your money. Go rent one, get your kicks. It's really easy. It's like $1,000 to $2,000 a day to rent a Ferrari or Lambo or something. Have fun and put it away, and then rent one the next time I use it. They suck in terms of, they're money pits. You want to be a car collector, or you're hyper passionate about it, it's one thing. But so many people think they're like a status symbol. And to me, I did this on accident, but it was a fun experience. I was on stage at a conference called Traffic and Conversions. It's a big marketing conference, and asked about, what's one lesson you've learned? And I'm like, if anybody thinks that someone driving a Lamborghini is a status symbol, it's like $3,000 a month, the lease. Which, yeah, sure, it's real money. But my fucking assistant makes more than double that. So like, it's not really a status symbol. If you own a business, buying a Lambo is just, it's a priority thing. And to me, yeah, plus insurance, sure. But still, it's not that expensive if you're running a big business. It's maybe an employee, and I have 170 of them. So it's just, it's not, it works, and with people building businesses, it generally attracts the lowest common denominator, because people that are smart enough, you want smart clients, you want smart customers that know that that's bullshit. They're way more fun to work with, and you're going to be way more successful. Or you're going to get a bunch of bottom feeders that think that means something, and they're probably going to be stuck in the same cycle too. So I said that on stage, but also apparently had a bunch of like those like thought leaders, self-promoters that had all pulled up in Lamborghinis in the crowd. Like there was like apparently 5 Lamborghinis out front. And I didn't know I was directly making fun of like the entire front row of my talk. So that was fun. But yeah, the point being, again, you get to do whatever you want with that money. You get to do whatever you want with your business. I guarantee if I had a private equity board right now, they'd be scared about, getting rid of the office. They'd be worried about what that's going to mean, because they didn't buy that business. They've invested in a business where we were owning the person, and now I'm taking a huge risk. Should we be taking that risk? I don't know. And by the way, here's what's simple. If I find out that was a stupid decision, I'll go rent an office. Like, it's those kind of things you get to decide. And what we want to do now, and what we're talking about, is having small Soho House style offices all over the country, because we're opening offices all over the country. So instead of having 27,000 square feet in LA, I'll have 5 to 7, but right on the beach, and probably a quarter of the price. So I'll save 75% of that. I'll use some of it to help my employees now working from home have some support there. I'll put some of it into growth of the company, and I'll put some of it into profitability, and still have a really cool space when people want it. So these are all different things to think about when you're deciding where to go. Now, getting back into a question a while ago, which is, raising money, I view there's a few reasons to raise money. Number one, if there is a sort of market share and time factor, like this is going to work right now. And a lot of tech companies and software, I see this as the case. Like we invested in an SMS marketing company called, and I'll get to your question next, Leslie. We invested in an SMS marketing company called Bootstrap because we were vetting a bunch of different SMS companies and we saw that being the next opportunity in marketing. We think SMS marketing was going to be big, and turns out right. Like that's been one of our best investments. And I don't think they should bootstrap because I think there's going to be a few winners in that space, and getting to market quickly, building up your tech team before you have the cash to necessarily pay them, and getting your sales team going and everything, like having some upfront cash to front load it does make sense in that business. Because if not, someone else is going to grab all the market share as that becomes popular. So Uber, kind of similar. The problem is the responsibility that you have to have that most companies miss. Casper missed this. Dollar Shave Club missed this. And don't get me wrong, it worked out. But for every one of them, 900 companies didn't work out. And what they miss is you still need to watch your unit economics. You still need to make sure that your CAC to LTV makes sense. And by the way, most critical numbers in business: CAC, how much it costs you to get a customer; LTV, lifetime value of a customer. CAC means cost per acquiring customer. Those two numbers, you just need to make sure there's a ratio there that's actually sustainable. And then you can juice the hell out of CAC because maybe your LTV takes 2 years to make. So it's going to take you time to make that money back, but you have to have those locked in so that you know that at some point your company is going to start profiting really well and making money. And a lot of companies miss that, and you end up with IPOs that fail. You end up with a lot of problems. So so that's where raising money can help you accelerate that. So if you're using money to grow a business, if you're using money to use for working capital, including marketing working capital, because another critical marketing tip, there's something called a purchase cycle or consideration period. The time you advertise to someone to the time they purchase, there's a time period there. And the easiest example of this is like every one of you have seen a car commercial. At some point, you've probably all bought a car, but it's probably never been in the same day that you saw the commercial and then went and bought the car. So understanding that like marketing is not an instant thing. Sometimes you have to spend money and then wait a little while to make that money back. And you need this working capital for marketing, for your supply chain. Sometimes you need to buy a bunch of inventory and then wait to sell it. All these kind of things that you start playing with that sometimes take financing. And that's okay. And again, venture funding can do that. Banks can help. Banks are a little harder if you're a new business. That's where but there are venture banks. There's all sorts of ways to do it, and you can get creative. But again, that's if you're in a business that you want to do that. And we talked about this earlier. So Dollar Shave Club sold for $1 billion. Mike Dubin, the founder, made 90 million. I now run a business worth 75 million. Same period of time, by the way. It took him 6 years to get that exit. I've taken way less risk. I've cash flowed along the way. I get to make my own decisions. And I ended up with a very similar outcome without the kind of risk he was taking. So to think that like that big venture exit's going to make you a ton of money, you're also diluting yourself in your business. You're also dealing with outside perspective. There's also, I think a 1 in 10 success rate for venture-backed businesses. Like you have to realize all the things that are playing into this, where bootstrapping it forces you can't run without unit economics because you can't grow your business. You don't have any other option. You have to have good unit economics. That's how you profit, because you have to build off profit. And so it forces you to have good business fundamentals that you're going to have sustainable. And my favorite case, and we do this a lot with our investments, get to a point where you're doing 20, 30, 50, 100 grand a month in revenue, and then raise money for growth. Like, because the other point of raising money is if you're raising money to get to market, you probably have the wrong team or you're the wrong person to build your business. And again, I'm speaking in generalities. There's nuance and exceptions to all of this. But if you can't get your business off the ground with your founding team without outside money, a lot of times you are building the wrong business. And we see it over and over again. Every once in a while, there's an exception. So there's very high tech things that you need funding for, and a lot of research projects and things like that, and pharmaceuticals, et cetera. Like those need funding. But a lot of business do not. And if you're building a tech company and you're not a developer and don't have a co-founder as a developer, that's a problem. So those are things. So I want to get into some of these questions. So how do you ensure quality of staff as you grew? What is the margin you should expect as your employee base grows? Yeah, so a few things and some of the bootstrapping. So this is another really important thing. I was 85% of our revenue. I drove 85% of our customer base in 3.5 years into business. We're on probably a $7-8 million run rate in net revenue. We probably had 70, 80 employees. And at that point, because we were scaling, and I was 85% of our book of business with a few salespeople. And it was that point, this is a fun little anecdotal story. Again, epic trips every year was part of my goal. And that was my wife's 30th birthday. We decided to go to Saint-Tropez for a few days, to Cannes to stop by, and then to the Monaco Grand Prix. If you can do it, it was fucking epic. I highly recommend it. Saint-Tropez is beautiful. We didn't realize this, but we got to Cannes during the Cannes Film Festival. So like we ended up at like the most celebrity studded party I've ever been to, all in tuxedos. A lot of fun stories in that. But then we get to the Monaco Grand Prix, which is literally the richest people in the world go there for the weekend. And thankfully I have a friend that lives there, stayed with them, got to hang out. And I'm hanging out at this hotel, the Fairmont Hotel in Monaco, which overlooks the whole bay. And you just see $400 and $500 million yachts everywhere. And I'm looking out and I'm like, you know, I like working. I actually really do. But the way I'm working right now, I could never buy one of those. I am not on a path at all or a trajectory that I could afford something like that. And it's not that I want to. Again, I'm not really that flashy of a guy. But I'd like the option. I'd like to be able to do whatever I want in life. That's part of my drive. And that change that I realized was I can't be driving 85% of revenue. I can't be have the kind of key man risk I have. So right when I got back, which is right after that, I actually took all the leads and all the people that were contacting me for marketing and passed them off to our sales team. It was like, it kind of ripped the Band-Aid. I was like, I'm not closing deals anymore. I'm not a salesperson. I have to scale our sales. It has to be I need to go from doing 85%. I need to get that as soon as possible down to 10%. And so that was in June or end of May. So June and July, our business dipped and it was gut wrenching. But again, and I'll go into that a little bit, but the fun thing about, again, bootstrapping your business is as long as you don't get underwater, my business dipping just means I make a little less money. And we've made money since the first year, plenty of money for me to live the lifestyle with. So it's a scoreboard. It's like, okay, fine, we made a little less money. We'll make it later. And you monitor it again for sustainability, but as far as my pocket, wasn't really a concern. And so we dipped a little bit in June and July, which is, again, a little nerve-wracking. You're waiting for it to stop dipping and you're hoping our people close those deals. And then they started closing it, and August was our biggest month ever back then. And we started to scale again. And so it forced me to build processes and procedures and a team that could actually close those deals. And again, it was painful for a short period of time, but then allowed us to scale. And now, I mean, again, we had our biggest month ever in June of this year. Every year has been bigger than the last. And I do not sell any. I think I closed a deal. So yeah, I closed one out of 60 deals last month just because it was a friend. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll get you signed up. Like, I don't do any of that anymore. And so it's become much more scalable. And we continue to find places like that where the moment as the founder, I find myself doing something full time, I look to hire for it. Because if I'm spending my time on something that I can't hire someone to do, it's probably a waste of my time too. So the moment there's a process in place, replacing yourself. That's the scaling part of this. You're bootstrapping and you're spending your time on shit you can't hire someone to do. You're either, your unit economics are off, you're probably not making enough money on the things you're doing, or you're probably doing something wrong. So spend your time on things that make sense to then build a process around and replace yourself. The example I give of that now, a lot of my time is spent on buying other agencies. We've bought 4 agencies and we're talking to a few. And so I just hired a head of corporate development to help me with that, but I'll slowly transition that responsibility to them. So that's one example. We're also expanding into other territories, which I've started to loop in other executives to take off my plate too. The key point here is nobody should be a key point of failure. And I definitely should not have a job at my own company. I should be all additive. And that's what you're constantly trying to build. So with 15 minutes left, I want to make sure I get some of your questions. So let's see I'll jump. If I missed your question, feel free to ask it again. Sorry, because I don't want to scroll up. So you mentioned if a person starts a tech business and is not a developer, has a developer co-founder, they can be in trouble. What if they outsource the development work to freelance developers? Yeah, so again, there's exceptions to this. There are people that have successfully done that. But my experience is every change you make to your company, every little tweak, and the knowledge of what tech can do is now in the hands of freelancers that cost you money constantly, which means if times get tough, you don't have access to capital, you're done. And that's a really tough place to be. So I would be very careful outsourcing to freelancers when that's the core of your business. By the way, finding a technical co-founder is hard. There's a reason I haven't built a tech company. We have software built for us now for our company, but the reason I haven't built a tech company is I'm not a tech guy. I've been around it my entire career, but like I can't manage developers very well. I've tried. I know that that's not my skill set. And like, if you want to be successful, like find the synergy of where your skill sets match the market's needs. You're going to be way more successful than trying to force a square peg in a round hole. So if you have and remember, good ideas are a dime a dozen. So careful with that too. Like good ideas, great and all, but like you have to be able to execute. That's really where the rubber meets the road. And if you can't execute it, chances are like your competitor is a developer that's building your same product, because everyone's going to have a competitor if they're in an interesting market, and they're going to build your same product, and it's going to be really hard. So again, there's exceptions to that, but generally it's a tough way to go. What are top 5 best moves you did towards the success and building of your company so far? Thank you. Question. I'd say number 1, my co-founder. Sincerely, like having someone that I can rely on, that I can, that can share the burden with me. Quick story: we had an employee 1 month in that took off and basically bailed on all his clients and just almost screwed us. And it was our email marketer, a lot longer story. The guy like met a girl over the weekend and went to get married in Hawaii and just bailed on everything. It was a crazy situation. But my partner jumped in, literally spent the weekend reading blogs on how to use Bronto and do email marketing, and took over for the guy. That was a really, he's just been great from the beginning, and to let me continue. He almost always has let me just focus on growing the business, and which is what I love to do. Number 2 is frankly scaling that sales piece. I'd say number 3 is learning how important culture was. My partner really cares about company culture and the people in it, and I care about people. I'm an empathetic guy, but I thought company culture was like getting a ping pong table, and it wasn't the true like ethos and spirit of the people in the company. And now I've learned that like how much that matters. The other thing I learned more recently is Darwinism kind of plays out in company culture too, where what you nurture is what you get. So if you placate to a lot of, poor work, and you make it, you let people complain, and you continue to placate to people that have bad attitudes, you're going to nurture people with bad attitudes, and people that are great workers that aren't complaining are going to end up getting burnt out because they don't want to be around this bullshit. So when you have patience for that, you nurture that, that's what grows. So it's almost what you allow to happen is what grows. And so you got to be strict on how you expect your people to act, and et cetera, and not have patience for it. And the people that act the way you are looking for and the type of culture you're trying to build will rise to the top because they feel appreciated, and they want to be in a culture like that too. So you have to be okay with sticking to your guns and being okay with, this is the type of business I'm trying to build, and not placate to everyone's complaints. Because even now with us going remote, we have people that are expecting us to like pay their rent now because they have to work from home. It's like, there's some crazy shit that comes out of this stuff, and you have to just know, like, stick to your guns sometimes. And that's been really helpful because now we've gotten a really strong culture through that kind of thinking. So, I mean, again, scaling with very little capital, be scrappy about the way you get customers, and make sure to hang on to them. That is the best way to do it. So what were the best lead gen tactics and tools you guys used during your first days? Network, partnerships. It wasn't like, let's go spend, the whole idea of arbitraging media spend, like that, it's a longer term play. Facebook, like, again, everyone that says like, we've spent $1 on Facebook and made $20 and we're just scaling that to millions of dollars, that's bullshit. And I've done this we've grown 2,500 companies. That doesn't mean Facebook is not a good channel. We spend a lot of money there, but it takes time to make your returns. And so when you're early, you can't afford that. You don't have the luxury of time. So you have to be scrappy and have the network, have the relationships to get those customers. I have so many partners that I've worked with forever, from individuals that are just constantly, marketing consultants that send me intros, to software companies that target our same customer. We're really big about that.
How do you incentivize partners? You're in the early days, you're a scrappy startup.
Yep.
How do you incentivize people to partner, right? So like there's two aspects here. What are some things you did specifically in the early days to get your first 2, 5, 10 customers and your partners?
Yeah, so the first few customers, I had enough of a network. Again, stepping into a business that I was already built to build was really a big part. I had a network, so like my first few customers were arm's length. I knew a lot of the ecosystem. So they're like, oh great, you're consulting now? Come work with us. So that was easy. From there, there's two things partner look for. Sometimes it's compensation. They want a 10% rev share on what they send you, et cetera. There are people that care about that. The other one's reciprocation, especially with like software companies. Like if I'm gonna send you business, I want you to send me business. And that's a really easy way that in collaborating, co-marketing, helping each other build your credibility. Even when you're young, that's important. Like even now, if an independent marketing consultant, we're pretty big at this point, came to me and said, hey, I'd love to do a collaborative webinar. Look at Lloyd and I right now. This is a great example. Let's co-market each other. Let's talk about each other. I'll come on here. We'll share. Like these are great ways. This is a partnership example right here that I don't know this for a fact, but maybe someone here is going to want to work with me because of a relationship. Or when we publish it and share it, people are going to see that we know each other, and that little bit of credibility is going to lend itself to now someone's going to want to work with one or both of us. That's the kind of stuff. That's partnerships. It's a really powerful tool at every stage of your business. So the first way to get them, add value to them. It's, Gary Vee's jab, right hook. Like you got to add value a bunch first before you expect people to give you value. And for me, I was doing tons of free marketing consulting. Like, hey, I'll help you out. I'll give you guidance. If you know anyone that needs help, happy to help them. Like just being a good person in the community is a big part.
Awesome.
Right.
Today, how have you scaled that? Like, so at what points did you hire a partnerships person? At what point did you hire like a head of marketing and sales? You've been head of sales, and you said you've been doing.
No, we have a VP of sales and a sales director. All those executives came in the past 2 years.
Okay. And how should startups think about it? Is there like a framework you follow on like, I'm going to hit this point and then?
Yeah, I think we were late on the partnership one because it turned out partnerships drives like 30 to 40% of our revenue. So 2 years ago, we actually had a salesperson that was less of a, sorry, dog, but we had a salesperson that was less of a salesperson or less sales and more just relationship driven. And we basically pivoted him into being our partnership person. And then he moved on, we hired someone to replace him, and we started to build that rollout. Now we are actually hiring a third person on that team because it's scaled very well. For sales, we've had several head of sales, but we found the one that we're stuck with 2 years ago. It's really hard to find sales leadership. Traditionally, just know that. Someone that can manage salespeople, that's not just a salesperson themselves, because a manager for sales is a lot of times very different than a good salesperson, but they have to understand good salespeople. But we got really lucky with someone, and then that became a big team. So then we hired a sales director when it became too much for one person to manage. So it's really just, do we think that there's a big enough source there to then add a lever that, it's coming up, everything should have a business decision. Meaning like when I hired a sales director, I'm looking, okay, so our sales team's, we're doing, so he started at the beginning of this year. So last year we, again, 75 million in revenue. Do I think that a guy, I'm going to pay him, I'm using round numbers, it's not his actual salary, but let's say a sales director makes 150 grand a year or 200 grand a year, whatever it is, 200 grand a year. Can I hire this guy and easily pay for them if they optimize our sales team? Do we think that we can turn that 75 into 75 or 76 million? Because frankly, if I can make $1 million off a 200 grand investment, that's probably decent. It's literally that kind of thinking, like, yeah, that should be a no-brainer. Let's hire this person. And that's the kind of stuff we look at. And then we actually set goals up to make sure that it far exceeds that. But that's a lot. That's kind of the decision making I have from even like, should I sponsor this event or do this thing? Is if I invest that, do we have a pretty sure thing that that's going to be a profitable investment and that we're going to make money off it, and that it's somewhere between profitable and very profitable? And like, is there an easy thesis around every decision we make, whether it's hiring, et cetera? We hired a head of services. It's, our top executive after my COO and I, to run our entire how we service clients, which we have directors under him and then managers under them and then all our experts working. And it's like, do we think that this guy servicing our entire business could add enough that we could pay for a decent executive that makes really good money but all he has to do is like, he's optimizing again, a $75 million business. Do we think he could probably help pay for his own salary very quickly by finding a few mistakes we're making in terms of churning customers? Yeah, easily. You know, he could probably pay for that. He could pay his annual salary in a month with one simple fix. So it's those kind of things that we think through. And then we also watch, where do we feel are our weak points? And sometimes that's refocusing existing teams. And sometimes it's, we don't have anyone to handle that. Currently, we don't have a director of marketing. They report our entire marketing team for Hawke reports into me and our head of sales. And so we're in interviews right now finding that person, because it's gotten to the point where there's our marketing team's awesome, but there's definitely an inefficiency in trying to report to me, who has a billion other things going on, and our head of sales, who's actually very similar to me, and someone that's not spending all day every day helping coordinate that. So again, same thesis. Do we think we can hire someone for the salary we're thinking about that's easily going to add value there and create more profitability?
So a couple more questions. We're getting to the top of the hour, and I know you need to go. What are the key traits that you look for because you took a little bit to calibrate and find that head of sales that works for you? What are the key traits you're looking for there, and on the marketing, head of marketing?
So yeah, head of sales and that's why, frankly, we have two people that are very, very yin and yang. The director and the VP are very different. Our VP is the charismatic, very bright, very soft skill driven guy. So the guy's a born salesman and he's actually a successful entrepreneur that sold a massive business when he was 30, and then around 50 joined us after screwing around and having fun and investing for 20 years. So we got lucky with him, but he's an entrepreneur at heart that knew how to drive salespeople, knew how to grind, knew how to invigorate, knew how to build culture. He did that team is a family, and he did such a good job of what can sometimes be a very cutthroat environment when you're dealing with sales. They love each other, they help each other, they train each other. He built an amazing culture on that team. And then we brought in the data-driven part, because that's important too, is the day-to-day true sales management is another aspect of it that frankly our VP doesn't have, but our sales director is brilliant at. So it's just figuring out all the metrics of how many calls do you have to make to get how many leads, to get how many proposals, to get how many agreements, to get how many closes, et cetera. And building out the pipeline and helping manage that. So you need that combo if you can find it, which is really hard to find. So we ended up with two, which were at a scale that we basically, got scrappy through the past couple of years where we didn't have the sales management, we had the sales leadership, and then ended up bringing in the sales management on top of it.
Awesome. And my last question here is around, you're in a very competitive industry. Lots of people are. How do you cut through the clutter and make a name for yourself and dominate in a competitive industry? What are some of the top 2-3 things?
Number one, proof's in the pudding. And again, I go back to the Lamborghini example. Smart people see through the bullshit. So if you're posting shit that's just obviously not true, you're going to attract dumb people. And by the way, those dumb people don't end up running very successful businesses either. And we both know a lot of people. We have actually some great mutual friends. We talked about Adigi earlier. They're a great PR SEO agency. They're so solid and such good people. Anyone that meets them is yeah, I got to work with you. And by the way, they always deliver. So they end up with someone like me on a podcast, and people saying yeah, they're great. You get that, you're going to break through. And then again, you have to remember, especially in an agency business, retention of clients is much more important. It's easy to get customers, but when you the more customers we keep, the more salespeople I can hire, the more marketing I can do, the more I can build a bigger and bigger engine, because our clients like us. They speak positively about us. We literally are putting out a case study a week now of the success we're having with brands people recognize. And so when you actually do good work, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So real quick on that, when I started, I had the credibility of my own 2 companies that I had sold and my background. So the first few months of hiring us, they were hiring me. But I had credibility, and I had more credibility than almost any other agency owner. Even my biggest competitors in LA, who are smart, great agency owners, none of them have built successful e-commerce companies themselves. That's very rare for someone to go from building product companies to going into agencies. So I had that edge. And then from there, we had success stories. We had relationships. We had a good reputation. We took care of people, and you perpetuate that, and that turns into an engine for you.
Awesome. Because customers are looking for an outcome, get them the outcome, and almost nothing else matters, right? Thank you so much, Erik. This was great. I enjoyed it. I learned a ton. Thanks everyone for joining us.
I need some traction.